Our top story this morning, as Becky just mentioned, a series of attacks that took place over the weekend on the world's two largest oil processing facilities in Saudi Arabia have energy prices soaring. You can see WTI crude right now at $59.55, Brent at $65.60. Big questions for the future of the Aramco IPO, airline prices, all sorts of things. Brian Sullivan is covering the huge moves in the oil prices in Houston, but we want to start this morning with Hadley Gamble in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Good morning to you, Hadley.
Good morning, guys. We are now over 48 hours from the largest ever terror attack on Saudi Arabia's oil production facilities, and still very muted response from not just the government itself, but Aramco. We've been told that in the next few hours, we could see more information coming out of the company just about how this happened, information about output, when things will come back online. But at the moment, all we've really got to go on is the re-emphasis time and time again when I've been speaking to these Aramco officials on the statement that they released several hours ago. And that was, of course, to say 5.7 million barrels are lost. That's, of course, the largest single outage in market history, greater than the 1979 revolution in Iran, greater than what we saw during the Gulf War. And also to say that that knocked out about half of their production capacity, and essentially that was 5% of global oil supplies. So right now, that's all we know from the government itself. But this has raised a host of international geopolitical questions. As you know, lots of questions about whether or not claims by Houthi rebels that they were able to take on this attack with drones are actually accurate. And a lot of that noise has been coming from the United States. President Trump, Mike Pompeo, essentially squarely putting the blame on Iran over the last 24 hours and calling on Saudi Arabia to make a statement and really to come out and decide how they're going to move forward on this, because this is a very, very hairy situation for the Saudis. Remember, the last several months over the summer, tanker attacks again and again in the Persian Gulf, and really a failure on the part of the United States to take much action. And I think that came as quite a surprise to a lot of Gulf governments, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So they've learned that the United States, at least so far, may have a lot of words but not too much action. And certainly that is weighing on whatever decision they make in the coming hours as to how they're going to respond to the possibility that this is an attack that came directly from Iran and possibly even via Iraq. And also, in the competing narrative, if you look at those U.S. satellite images of the attacks on these two facilities, 17 flashpoints, highly coordinated, and one that required a great deal of input in terms of just the mechanics of getting it done, and lots of questions now being raised over whether this was missiles plus drones or missiles alone. So a lot of rumors circulating here in Riyadh, and frankly, not much news from the government. So in the coming hours, we are expected to hear more information about this initial investigation by Aramco, but also hoping to hear something from the Saudi Foreign Ministry and the government itself. And certainly that is something that the United States is looking for as well. Guys?
Hadley, a couple of questions. Obviously, there's the big geopolitical question, which is what happens next in terms of what it means to be locked and loaded vis-a-vis what President Trump has said and what Iran may or may not do. But the question I had just specifically related to oil right now, S&P has a report out this morning saying that Saudi Aramco has only 35 to 40 days worth of supply. It sounds like Aramco thinks that they can get about a third of that back online as early as this week. Do you have any more details about how quickly any of this can really happen? And is that a good estimate, or is that wishful thinking?
I think that's a pretty good estimate at this point, because that 35 to 40 number is one that we verified ourselves. And I think that when we talk about what's going to happen next, I've had many conversations quietly with the Aramco folks, waiting to see what kind of information and how they're going to roll out that information today, whether it would be a press conference, whether it would be interviews, hopefully, whether it would be a situation where they would even just issue a statement as to what's been happening. There was also the prospect raised internally about potentially having a statement before the market opened around 2 a.m. local time. They decided not to go with that. They decided to really kick the can a little bit further down the road. And they were essentially telling me we want to be as accurate as possible. And frankly, we're essentially worried about putting out any misinformation that could really hurt the narrative. And of course, that all has to do, as you guys very well know, with the fact that this is coming against a backdrop of not just all the geopolitical unrest and uncertainty with regards to Tehran and everything that's been happening over the last couple of months in the Persian Gulf, but this also has to do with, you'll remember, just a week ago, the ousting of the long-serving energy minister of Saudi Arabia, also the chairman of Aramco, also, leading OPEC and that OPEC Plus agreement with Russia, Khalid al-Fallah. So he's out the door, and just a week later, we have a new energy minister at the helm. Saudi Aramco now chaired by the head of the Public Investment Fund. All eyes focused on really pushing forward with that IPO. So this timing is quite interesting, isn't it? And also, of course, against the geopolitical backdrop of the UN General Assembly happening in the next several days and the possibility that President Trump could decide to ease sanctions on Tehran.